Teresa and I tried to go play pinball today. There is an Attack from Mars machine 5 exits up I-5 from us, and it was out of order. So we played no pinball. Out of order pinballs, bad pinballs. That's not the point. This is episode 40 of Coast to Coast Pinball. 4-0. It's going to be a good one. Let's go. Welcome to Coast Pinball. My name is Nate Shivers. This is a podcast. It is a commentary. I'm a man out of quarters. Episode 40. 40 episodes. Told you we'd get to number 50 by the end of the year. We'll be there. Tonight, we're following up the Brendan Bailey interview with another interview from another great young mind in pinball. The new guard, we'll call it. There's the old guard, the folks that got us where we are, and now there's the new guard, the guys who are up and coming, who are putting the sweat equity into building the future of this hobby and this art form. And tonight, we have a very, very cool interview in store for you. I really hope you enjoy it. The Brendan Bailey interview was the quickest episode as far as downloads to kind of the average number of downloads I get in a week. I got to that in like 2.5 days with Brendan's interview, so that was really awesome. So we will try and do interviews when it's the right interview, and this is another one I'm hoping you guys enjoy. So we're going to chat with Scott Gullicks from Riot Pinball right now. I would like to welcome tonight to Coast Pinball Scott Gullicks, the creator of what had to be one of the most talked about pinball machines coming out of the 2013 Pinball Expo, Wrath of Olympus. How are you tonight, Scott?
I am doing fantastic, Nate. Thank you. I'm very excited. This is my first ever podcast.
Well, good. It took us a little bit to get it up and connected, but it sounds good now. So I think we're set to go here.
Great.
So where are you located? You're up in Minnesota somewhere? Is that right?
Yeah. Yep. I'm located in the Twin Cities. Right there in Minnesota. Grew up in Duluth, Minnesota, and basically spent pretty much my whole life in Minnesota.
Oh, very good, very good. So I gotta say, when I was doing my prep ahead of Pinball Expo this year to kind of do a rundown on the show, I didn't know who a lot of the guys working on the boutique games were, per se, and I didn't know names to machines and the guys working in the digital realm versus the guys working in actual kind of the boutique, quote-unquote, real independent pinball machines. And as soon as I, cross-referenced your name to the game that you were working on, I was really intrigued because your game, Wrath of Olympus, which started out digital and now has moved to an actual built game in reality, is pretty amazing. This must be kind of an exciting time for you, getting to take a game you built to Expo from the ground up.
Yeah, it's actually, it sounds cliche, but it is a dream come true. Ever since I've been a little kid, I've always thought about, designing and building my own pinball machine, and actually being able to come through with that and be able to show something off at Expo was just absolutely amazing. It just felt really incredible.
So growing up in Minnesota, you say you were already thinking about building pinball machines. What started the pinball addiction for you? What was your spark there?
It's kind of hard to say exactly. I've always been really deep into games, whether they're card games, board games, video games, or pinball games, but I remember a lot of the bowling alleys we used to go to would always have the pinball machines in the back. So after I got done throwing my gutter balls, I'd go play some pinball. And as I was growing up through high school, too, I was always really interested in art and the sciences. And looking at pinball and the way it kind of combines all these awesome engineering challenges as well as the artistic side of it really sparked my interest.
So what era games did you grow up on? What were some of the titles that you remember playing?
Most of the games I played were probably from the 80s. So like Sorcerer is probably my favorite game from the 80s. Fire was another really great game that I liked to play back then. And then, as I started to get older, I started into the 90s and, playing those Williams Bailey games or Bally games, Attack from Mars, Twilight Zone, the original Indiana Jones. It was just an amazing, amazing job of pinball, laying out great shots and doing a fantastic job of the artwork.
And when you say the artwork, that's probably the first thing that I think most people who pull up a thread on a forum or a rundown from Expo see is this artwork on Wrath of Olympus. It's, not to just, sit here and compliment you or anything, but it's pretty amazing how good that artwork ends up looking. And I guess you're drawing that from all sorts of areas of your life growing up, not just pinball?
Yeah, I've probably been sketching since I was in kindergarten, and to be a good artist, I don't even know if I'm even there yet, but it takes a heck of a lot of discipline and a lot of practice. And doing the artwork for Wrath of Olympus, I probably have over 500 hours into just the artwork alone for the playfield and the back glass. So, getting to really put something high quality into a machine takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And honestly, I think it takes a lot of history and just going through and being a bad artist and learning how to become a good artist.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm not that guy at all. I love the games. I love to me the design side of it's sort of interesting, the physics of it and the build side of it, but the art side of it just would scare me to death on that level. So it's pretty amazing that you've been able to do kind of all of those things. Did you build stuff? Were you a tinkerer as a kid? Did you work on things?
Yeah, actually, probably to my dad's chagrin, I was always in the basement finding stuff, putting things together. If I remember watching a medieval show once, and the guy had a Morning Star, and I went into the basement and I figured out a way to use my dad's snow chain irons to be able to create my own Morning Star. Just there's always been a really, I guess, ingenuity in my background to figure out how to make things that I wanted to have that I couldn't just either go out and buy because they were too expensive or because I couldn't get them for whatever reason. And that's actually been a huge part of my life, being an engineer, using those skill sets to really, figure out how to make things and solve problems. And in some fundamental way, it's all about problem solving.
Are you an engineer by day? Is that your day job?
Yeah. So when I graduated from high school, I kind of had a tough decision. It was either become a starving artist or go become an engineer. And I chose the path with more money.
Yeah, I guess so.
I ended up going to school out in the University of North Dakota in Grand Forks for a mechanical engineering degree. And I also took a whole ton of art classes when I was out there. And that was actually pretty interesting because I go through the engineering school, and it was just this really rigid curriculum. You had to be at a class. You had to get your homework in on time and test for a specific time. Then I'd go over to the art buildings, and it was like, oh, yeah, if you get that project in the next week, it's good. Don't worry about it. Just a whole amazing dichotomy.
I bet. Well, and pinball seems to kind of encompass that in a lot of ways. If you read back, I don't know if you read a lot about the historical side of the machines, but I notice there's always that line between whether it's, say Dennis Nordman and Greg Ferris. There's one guy doing this designing and sort of the build, and then there's the handoff that seems to take place to the artist. And so I think you have something pretty neat going on, being able to handle both sides of that.
Yeah, I definitely think so. And I think it's been one of the big things that's helped me drive this project forward so quickly. And you can do all of the layout and the electronics and the mechanical and then still visualize how all the artwork's going to go together, and you can start planning all those pieces together, and you don't have to necessarily run it by a whole bunch of other people and get their buy-in or approval, and you can just put those pieces together. I think it just makes for a much faster product development life cycle, for instance.
Sure. Well, so noting that Wrath of Olympus started out as a visual pinball digital design, did you have a background with computers as well, or is that just sort of hand in hand as you went through engineering school?
It's a little hand in hand. I think the biggest part of it is, again, just kind of creative problem solving and just deciding you want to do something. So my software background is extremely limited. I think through school I learned Fortran 77, which any programmer out there is probably going to laugh at that. So my understanding of it is extremely, extremely limited. But I got tuned into visual pinball or virtual pinball maybe 2.5 years ago and was just completely blown away by the quality of these tables that these guys were making, and then just making free to download for anybody that wanted to. I just couldn't believe these guys were putting in that many hours over and over and over again for it. So I thought it was really cool. And at that same time, I actually started my own real pinball collection. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that all of a sudden starts realizing you got a limited amount of space in your house. So the idea of virtual pinball was really, really cool. So I think about 2.5 years ago, I built my first digital pinball machine. And then that's where I started seeing the software of the visual pinball and future pinball, digging into a little bit, and was just realizing that, okay, I've got a basic understanding of computers. It's all got really good graphic user interfaces. Really anybody that can solve problems on the most basic level, I honestly think can get into visual pinball or future pinball and start designing their own pinball games.
Wow, that's very cool. So when did you see? What was your first design? You said that Wrath of Olympus wasn't your first virtual design. What was your first design?
So Wrath of Olympus was actually my first real pinball design. I built a digital pin cab first in order to make Wrath of Olympus. But pretty much Wrath of Olympus was the very first table I ever loaded visual pinball into and started dragging ramps and dragging walls and creating bumpers, slings, and flippers.
Wow. And so how long after you kind of decided it was finished as a digital table and you published it for people to download, how long was it from that point to the point of, okay, I'm actually going to try and build this thing in the flesh, so to speak?
Good question. So about 2 years ago today, I started the artwork and I started the layout for Wrath of Olympus in a digital perspective. And then in about, I think, August, JP Salas, who anybody on the forum will probably say is the virtual pinball god, volunteered to actually code my table. As I said before, my amount of software is extremely limited, but what's cool about the visual pinball and future pinball is you can still build the tables and get them working, but to get them coded, if you don't have that skill set, you're probably going to need some help. But the great thing is that the forum is there with these people that are willing to do that. And JP Salas stepped up, and he ended up coding my program, and then he and I launched that table together basically just a few weeks before last year's Chicago Pinball Expo.
So you went to that expo, and you've been actually really great. I've read a lot of the stuff that has been written about you and listened to some things, and you've been really good at saying, I do have some help here. There has been guys helping me on the programming side of it. So I did want to throw that out there. So you went to last year's Expo 2012 with your designed virtual table. What was your role at Expo like that year? What did you do while you were there?
So last year was really more of just go out and seek and find type of thing. I wanted to see what people were doing. Skip B, I think, had their Predator machine out there. I talked to those guys to get a little information on what they did to actually create their own real pinball machine. I used it a lot to attend the seminars. The Chicago Expo is just awesome for listening to seminars. It's amazing what little details you pick up that will help you out later that you really don't know about. And more than anything, I think it was just, to try to collect some data and just get a little more information before I stepped into this big role of building a pinball machine. And I think it was pretty much after Expo where a few people that I'd never met before were like, hey, I had my little T800 as my avatar on my name badge, and they'd come up to me and they'd say, hey, you made the Wrath of Olympus table, didn't you? I was like, yep. And they're like, you got to make that a real thing. And it was probably about 3 months after we launched the digital table, and all that feedback through the Chicago Pinball Expo and all the emails I was getting from people saying, hey, if you can make this thing, you should really try to make it into a real pinball machine. So approximately last December is when I started, cutting, so to speak, and really making parts.
Wow. So what do you think set your digital design? What do you think? Why did people grab Wrath of Olympus in their mind and think, oh, this one would be good built up? Is there something that you can look at it now, sort of step back a little bit and say, here's what I did right, or here's what captivated some minds?
I think pinball is kind of a fickle thing, but honestly, I think artwork sells machines, in my opinion. I've played a lot of pinball machines that I didn't really care for that much, but the artwork was just amazing. That makes you want to come back and play it just to look at it. And I think part of that might be why Wrath of Olympus has been very popular, is I put so much time into doing the artwork to really make it pop. But on top of it, I took into account all the influences I had on the tables that I really enjoy, and those would be ones that have a lot of flow to them. Like Terminator 2 was the first pinball machine I ever bought. Happened to be also the first pinball machine in the dormitory where I was staying that we would just grind out day after day after day in between homework sessions. So, but I think that flow, that little bit of nostalgia back to those 90s pins and late 80s pins, and then bringing in kind of the more modern feel, though, with more flippers and the upper play field and the rule set. I think maybe the rule set might have been another big thing. I think we've got 4 monsters, 4 gods, bunch of hurry-ups. There's actually a pretty deep rule set for a handmade, hand-coded pinball machine.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think you're exactly right. So, in doing my own research on Wrath of Olympus, there seemed to be a moment when you were looking to build the game where you had to decide what was going to be the kind of the driving force here, and you ended up using the P-Rock platform, which I think you probably would have gotten there. That seems to be what they're doing there is the best. I hate to say the best. That's sort of a little bit that's my opinion, but just based on the games coming out now and based on the more you read about it, what Multimorphic's doing with the P-Rock platform, that seems to be the one to use to build a game. What got you there? How'd you get to it? And, if you could talk just a little bit about how the P-Rock has sort of helped you build this game up.
Sure, that's a great question. It's kind of funny you asked that, because when I first started my Pinside forum, I think it was, approximately last December, the first question I think in my post was, hey, what do you guys think about what I should use from an electronics perspective? And a lot of the people responded back with, use the P-Rock. And I had already been talking with Kevin from the Skip B guys about his use with that. And at the time, the P-Rock was really highly competitive in my mind with just using an LED whiz with an iPad controller. There was a guy on the VP forums that did an incredible build called Gyrus, that he basically built his own real pinball machine and had it running through the visual pinball software with just a bunch of relays, LED whiz, and an iPad.
Wow.
So I spent a lot of time struggling on, okay, I can get an LED whiz and an iPad and a bunch of relays and do all that wiring for, a few $100 versus getting a P-Rock, which, I'm going to lay down $300 just for the P-Rock plus all the driver boards. But in the end, I think it was having a more stable system, not relying on relays, being able to turn the flippers on and off when I wanted to, and not having them hardwired switches, that really won me over the P-Rock. And I think the other thing I really want to say is the P-Rock Pinball Controllers Forum. Mm-hmm. I think his name is Joe Shabadoo. He has a tutorial on there that when I read through that and I saw that he gave these step-by-step directions on how you can get a machine flipping without having to have any programming knowledge, that's what sold me on the P-Rock.
Wow, and what's his name again? Our connection was a little wonky there when you said his name. I want him to get credit for that for sure.
Sure. I think his handle is Joe Shabadoo.
Okay, cool, yeah. Good. Okay, so you started building, and you can go back and you have posts where you can see the evolution. What did you think was the hardest part going from visual pinball to a pinball machine? What were the parts where you're just like, oh my gosh, I didn't foresee this, or it just slowed you down?
Good question. You've got a lot of those things. Every part kind of had its own struggles and its own positives and negatives. I actually would say that there wasn't a single one that really slowed me down, because I had so many awesome people in the forums helping me out. I was really worried about getting my playfield done right. But Main Man on the pin side, I think he's got extremepinball.com. He stepped up and offered to CNC my playfield for me for cost of materials, which I thought was just absolutely incredible. So there's a big check off there on having a really well done playfield. From as far as a component perspective and building ramps and building wireforms and building ball guides, that's what I do on a day-to-day job right now. So all that's, and not necessarily building those things, but prototyping and building parts. So I wasn't worried about that. What I was really most concerned about through this whole process was the software side of things. And when I started it, I was going to be completely happy with just bringing a flipping machine to Expo and kind of follow that Joe Shabadoo tutorial. But then another VP forum member, Ryan Waltrip, stepped up, and he was the first guy to volunteer and say, hey, you know what, I'll help you out with the software. And I still remember the first day that we were down in my basement. We got the P-Rock connected to a PD16 board, and we had an LED flashing. It was like a miracle. It was just awesome.
That's cool.
And then this summer, Frank Gelati stepped on board, and he is just a wizard with software. He hadn't even learned Python before. In a matter of a few months, we had all these modes programmed, and we just had an incredible demo unit. I still remember him saying, I was talking to him, I'm like, yeah, I just want to have a flipping machine ready and maybe one mode. And we were Skyping back and forth, and he just looked at me and said, no, that's not going to do it. We got to have it, at least 8 modes done. Let's get it done. So those guys volunteering, stepping up, it just makes the program and the project go so much easier, and you get that little bit less stress, and you can focus on getting things done.
That's very cool. And what would you say, looking at the game once it was sort of built up, and if you could look at it versus the games you've played, maybe the games you own, what would you say sort of influenced the layout, the actual structure? It's sort of I hate to call it a fan layout. I mean, it is a fan layout, but it does have a lot going on also in the back half of the design. Where would you say you pulled from when you designed the layout of Wrath?
Boy. Well, I think Terminator 2 had a big influence, hitting the left-right ramps, build up payback time, the nice orbits. Theater Magic, actually, I love the flow on that game, how that ball is always moving, and that's one of the things that I just love about pinball. I'm not a big fan of stop-and-go pinball. I like games that the ball is always on the fly.
Yeah.
And as far as rule sets, I think kind of the more newer games, I think, really influence that. But yeah, from a layout perspective, I really think about the Terminator 2s. I'm trying to think. Medieval Madness even has a little influence there with the ramps, and yeah, it is kind of a fan layout. But you know what, I love those games, and I think you could probably retheme a number of these old games with just new art, new themes, and they'd sell like crazy.
Just because I think you're right.
Art sells.
Yep, I think you're right. What is there anything when you're designing a game, when you're looking at this, and maybe not when you start out with the virtual? Is there any thought of like trying to create something new that hasn't been seen, or are you more of the mindset of it's a pinball machine? We kind of are drawing on classic sort of ideas. There's certain things that people want to see. They want to see ramps. They want to see wireforms, pop bumpers. Or are you thinking in your head, what could we do that would blow people's mind that maybe has never been done before? I mean, do you have thoughts like that?
Yeah, I think when I get to like a third and fourth pinball design, I'd like to go there. I'm also kind of in the position of I want to learn to walk before I run. So I'd like to learn how to design a pinball machine that's kind of more conventional before I figure out how to design a game that's cutting edge. In that market too, there's, obviously Multimorphic is trying to do that with their P3 system. I guess a little bit too ties into the whole how comfortable you are with virtual pinball and future pinball.
Yeah.
Because, doing cutting edge things in that software isn't necessarily easy either, especially when you look at like the P3 and what it's trying to do. I'm not necessarily sure that would be so easy to emulate any of those platforms right now.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. So between the move from a digital pinball machine to a pinball machine, what had to change? Were there things that came up where you just said, well, this has to be different, or did it stay really close?
There was only one thing I think that had to change, and that was originally I had 2 pop bumpers right underneath the upper playfield. And when I started doing the layout, in order to really get those 2 flippers on the upper playfield working, I really wanted to run flipper bats with 6-inch shafts all the way through. And because I was running them down through the playfield, the upper playfield, and down through the lower playfield, I needed that space, and it couldn't be occupied by the pop bumpers. So I ended up removing those and making a smoother orbit up there instead. And I didn't want to get a whole bunch of flack from people for not having any pop bumpers in the game. So I tried to look at new areas I could put one, and that's actually one of the reasons I got my pop bumper right above to the right of the right slingshot.
Yep.
I had no idea how well that was going to turn out, and it's just been a wonderful surprise to see how fun that has been to have over there. And then also doing the layout, you got everything in digital space, and the ball kind of does what it wants to do. Some of the shots seem a little easier in digital space. And when I got it laid out in my first original, I'm going to say prototype playfield, the shots felt super duper tight. So I ended up moving from a standard body into a wide body and just increasing the shot sizes just a little bit to take advantage of that, extra inch and a half. But besides those changes, the shots and the layout flow and hit very, very closely to the digital build.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm actually looking at a picture of the digital playfield versus the actual pictures from Expo, and I see exactly what you mean by going to a wide body.
It was really cool too because I was able to add this one other little loop shot. I've seen on a lot of forums people have wondered, what the hell is the middle left flipper good for? But I found in this design that middle left flipper is essential for being able to flip it across the play field, bring it through that little loop, which returns it to the right flipper and gets you accurate shots and puts you in a position to be able to make the shots you need to make a little bit more easily. And in this game, the modes go fast, and if you miss shots, you need to be able to get the ball back to the flippers to a controlled position to be able to hit the shots you do need to make. So making that change from the digital one to the real one has been another big benefit.
How much stress, if any, were you under getting ready for this year's Expo, trying to take the machine to Chicago?
I think there was a lot of stress and there was a little stress. I was probably pretty stressed out overall. To tie it all in, back in December when I started this program, my wife and I actually found out that we were going to be expecting too. So I had kind of a 9-month ticking time bomb to get this thing done and have it ready for Expo. So I had all that stuff going on. But, when Frank Gelati got on board and Ryan Waltrip got on board and we really started programming and hammering this thing out, we started making these milestones just day after day, and the build was just coming together. By about August, I was feeling much, much better about it. And by the end of August, when the kiddo came, the pinball machine was about ready, and I kind of had the whole month of September to really kind of take a look at things, improve the code, fix bugs, that kind of thing. And then, getting it ready and getting it to Expo, that was a whole nother story. That was pretty stressful because you just never know how a one-up prototype's going to run for 4 straight days.
And so you got there and you got it up and running. How was it? What was the weekend like?
It was just incredible. First of all, I was excited that after we got it in and the legs on, that everything turned on and worked right. So that was we jumped for joy there. But and then what I was really, really glad to see was the number of people that came up. I think we had 4 or 5 people deep almost every day waiting to play Wrath of Olympus. And it almost sucks in a way because I've seen a lot of forums and heard a lot of people that said they really wanted to play it, but they couldn't because there were always so many people around it. So I guess it was kind of a nice problem to have. And from a playability perspective, I was really happy with the way the prototype turned out. I was stressing a little about how robust it was going to be. How many times can these prototype parts get hit by a ball moving at 30 miles an hour or whatever before they break? And we had one night where I think we shut off at 10 o'clock and then had to fix a ball jam. And maybe half a dozen to a dozen times we slid the glass down a few inches to release a ball. But that was it. We were running 4, 5, 6 hours a night for 3.5 days straight.
Wow, that's awesome. How did the seminar go? I know you're part of the P-Rock. Is it a P-Rock seminar? Is that what you guys called that one?
Yeah, I think it was a P-Rock. It was me, Eric, Kevin, and Josh, I think, were up there. I think the focus of that was just to let people ask questions on, specifics about creating your own pinball machine or questions regarding the P-Rock. I think the bulk of the questions were really more software-based, things around coding, multi-ball, stuff like that. But There are a few questions regarding builds and how you handle wiring and wire management and things like that I was able to contribute a little bit to.
So while you were at Expo, did you have any of the kind of I don't want to call them the old guard per se, but any of the bigger names that we know from, say, Stern or from other companies or past companies talk to you or play the game, or did you get a chance to interact with any of those guys?
Yeah, there are a few that came by. I think at this time I can't really say their names. A few people stopped by that I think wanted to play it but couldn't play it because of their own contractual obligations or whatnot.
Sure.
But yeah, I know like Ben Heck came over and played it, so that was really cool to be able to talk to him and see him play the game. So there are a few people I noticed came by. I think Python stopped by. He told me he hated the back glass, and I said, "Oh, that's just fine." That's what I love about pinball. Some people love the art, some people hate it, and if everybody loved it, that'd be boring. So, but it was nice to hear him say that he hated the artwork, but he loved the layout. That to me spoke more than his opinion of the artwork.
Absolutely, that's a good story. I like that. So let me ask you this: I know people were asking you about buying the game, pre-ordering the game, gauging a level of interest in trying to sell the game. What do you want to do with the game now? What if you could just snap your fingers? Would you want, say, Gary Stern to walk over and say, "Hey man, you should come work for us. Let's build this game"? Would you like somebody to just point you the direction to start it yourself, do it yourself, to build some number of games on your own? Or what would the ideal situation for you and your team be to actually produce some number of Wrath of Olympus?
That's another good question. So again, my background's in product development, so doing electromechanical assemblies and designing them and scaling them up is something I do on a daily basis. So I'm really right now kind of weighing my options on the effectiveness of doing the full design to finish and then hiring a contract manufacturer to actually scale this up for me. That could potentially be more profitable and easier to do than working with a Stern. But at the same time, right now, I'm kind of leaving my options open. So, if there's other manufacturers out there that would be interested in possibly making Wrath of Olympus, I'd be more than happy to talk to them, and in fact, would love to talk to them about that. But right now I'm just kind of taking one step at a time. There's still a lot of work that I want to do with it. Frank Gelati's already been pestering me to start getting multi-ball coded in and things like that. So, ideally, one way or the other, I'd really like to get this game made, at least on a small volume, just because of the significant number of hours I've put into this, the sacrifice my wife made on her own to let me go work on this for the last year and a half, 2 years, and all these other guys that have put in their time for free just to help me out. I'd really like to kind of make something more of it than just a single prototype that's sitting in my lineup in the basement.
Well, I think you're in a great position because I mentioned this on another podcast, and I got a couple emails on it. I was talking about the gentlemen who have the Matrix pinball machine, and I thought it's almost sort of, to me, that project ends on a bit of a sad note because they built this great kind of concept with this really cool look and feel and some nice coding ideas, and they can't build the machine. They'd have to go license the Matrix and build, I think there's a giant roadblock in the way where they're sort of at the end. And to me, you coming off of Expo 2013, it's like it's one of the bright spots. It's really the beginning, hopefully, for you in the game.
Thank you. I think so, too. A lot of people ask me how I came up with the theme, and that was one of the things that drove me to come up with an original theme. I look at the Matrix, and you're right. They just did a phenomenal job with that. And I can't imagine how many thousands of hours those guys put into the code and re-theming it. And to be able to put all that time into it and not be able to let more than just a couple people enjoy it is just really too bad. So, that I agree. That's the one cool thing I think about Wrath of Olympus is, I picked a theme that I enjoyed, that I thought a big part of the world was going to enjoy, that's not licensed. I can just, do what I want with it and not have to worry about, am I going to be able to make this later or not?
What brought you to the Greek god idea? Where did that come from? What was sort of the inspiration there? Part of it is just I'm a huge history buff, and the Greek gods is something that's always really, really entertained me.
Then I did a little homework too on, what pinball machines have been made recently. And I look back through like the 90s games are my favorites. And they had Tales of Arabian Nights was just an awesome game. Medieval Madness, all these games that have kind of in a similar genre, but didn't necessarily hit on the Greek gods. And, besides, I think Mars God of War and Medusa, which is another one of my favorite games from the 80s, there really hasn't been a great pinball machine with the Greek gods. So I thought, hey, why not? I can get some really cool visuals with all the monsters and the gods and the different modes. It just seemed like it'd be a great theme to really tie into pinball. And I think one of my modes is Cerberus, and I've got 3 ramps, and Cerberus is a 3-headed dog. So I think I'm tying some of that into what people know to help make the modes a little easier also. So to beat Cerberus, you hit the 3 ramps and then hit the drop target for your big payoff.
What is kind of the state of you as a company? And I know you work under the name Riot Pinball. Is Riot Pinball just you? Is it some of the guys that have helped you along the ways? Is there any sort of thought process on that? Or are you still solely the owner of Wrath of Olympus? Or is it kind of pieces had to be given out along the way? How's that working out?
No, I'm still 100% owner. Riot Pinball is a LLC I started about a year and a half ago, right before I really dove headfirst into building this pinball machine. So right now I own all the rights, but I've had some agreements in place with these guys that have helped me out to help them out if this ever goes anywhere.
Sure, absolutely.
Anybody that meets me knows that I'm not a great guy, but I'm a good guy, and I'm out here to help.
You're good, but not great. Is that what I just heard? You've endorsed yourself to good, but not quite to great.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, that's okay. That's all right. So what's next? Are we going to see the game at some other shows coming up? What does 2014 look like for you as far as getting out and showing the game off?
2014 right now is going to be dedicated to taking Wrath of Olympus or Wooly to the next level. We got a lot of great feedback from Expo, and I think primarily we're going to upgrade lighting. Part of it was just, we had a timetable that I wanted to meet to have something playable at Expo, and we got there, and now it's taking it to the next level. So adding flashers, adding more GI light. There's a couple of unique toys that I want to add to the game. Getting the multi-balls coated, getting all the bugs out, and just getting it to be, in my opinion, a retail quality game is what I'm going to be dedicating my time to. And depending on when those pieces come together, and if it makes sense for me to be able to bring it to some of these other shows, I'm going to bring it. What I want to do is make sure the next time I show it off that it's going to be that wow factor. I think at Expo, people weren't expecting, I think, that level of a custom-built pinball machine. And I want to bring that same excitement every time I bring it out until it's ready.
Definitely. Well, I hope that you get to that point that you come to the Midwest Gaming Classic, because I do plan on going there, and I want to play your game. I'm very excited about getting to play the game and see it in person.
Awesome. Well, we're hoping to get out there. I believe that's at the end of March, so we got a lot of work to do before then, and I've got an 8-week-old to take care of also, so it's kind of funny, I see a lot of people that want to start these builds and they get going right away, and then all of a sudden the reality sets in about how much time it takes and how much time it takes away from everything else you do, and it adds up quick. But when you got great people on the team, things always seem to help and go faster.
Absolutely. Well, Scott, I really appreciate you spending some time with us on Coast to Coast Pinball. I wish you nothing but the best of luck. I hope we can keep in touch as this goes, and we'll do some updates along the way, and hopefully we get to run into each other. I think Midwest Gaming Classic this year is April 12th and 13th, so we bought you 2 extra weeks, I think, this year.
There you go. It's my lucky day.
Perfect. All right, man. Well, we will stay in touch. Best of luck, and thanks again for coming on Coast to Coast Pinball.
Thank you very much. I really appreciated the time.
Absolutely.
I'll talk to you later.
Thanks, man. Well, let's just wrap it up. I want to thank Scott again. That was a lot of fun. The interview shows, I started out saying I wasn't going to do it, but the right people kind of caught my attention and agreed to come on the show. The 2 important parts of that. Thanks everyone for listening. It's been 40 episodes. It's been a fun a fun ride to 40. I can't wait to get to 50, 60, and beyond. There's a lot going on right now. There's a lot of moving parts for Coast to Coast Pinball. We've got t-shirts in the mail on the way that we'll have up on the site in the next couple weeks that will be available for purchase. I've had a lot of requests for some swag. There'll be opportunities to win a shirt and all that good stuff. But you know, I love hearing from you guys. I have a ton of email backed up, and I'm kind of past the point of being able to guarantee I will read your email on the show. I just have too many, and I don't want to do full-on mailbag shows where it's just nothing but me reading emails. But I will pick out the stuff that I think works on the episodes that we're doing. They're all appreciated. I will reply to everything. I can't imagine not replying to somebody who takes the time to email me. So we will get to you your emails coming up soon. If you'd like to throw something out at me, what I'm really interested in is I want to know what you're doing with pinball wherever you are. If you're in Muskegon and you want to talk to me about what the scene's like there, tell me that. Tell me where you're playing pinball. Tell me what games you're buying. Tell me what you're thinking about. I love that stuff. Tell me about auctions. Tell me about markets and all that good stuff. If you go to shows, I want to hear it. I really appreciate those emails. So that's how you can best contribute to Coast Pinball. Shoot me an email. Tell me what's going on. Tell me your thoughts on the show. Love that too. Coast2Coast pinball@gmail.com is the email address. That's coast, the number 2, coast, pinball@gmail.com. Our website is www.coast2coastpinball. You can please like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter @C2C Pinball. Until next time, this is Coast to Coast. Later.